I'm Frances Rowe, who you heard from today, is going to open up the next meeting.
Without a microphone, it's not going to help my raspy voice. So again, I apologize. I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker. To many in this room, she needs no introduction. As a dedicated listener and tireless advocate, Rachel Thomas has served as a powerful voice for the internet and people of Lethbridge Riding since she was first elected as an MP in 2015. Powered by the story people share with her, Rachel puts a human face to government policy when she speaks in the House of Commons. Rachel is currently sitting on the Heritage Committee, where she passionately defends the rights and freedoms of Canadians. From 2020 to 2021, Rachel serves as the Shadow Minister for the Digital Government. During her time in this role, she successfully fought against Bill C-10, now C-11, which was a government bill created to censor online content and threaten the freedom of speech that's guaranteed by Canadians under the Section 2B of the Charter. In 2019, Rachel was elected as the chair of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics. In that position, she acted as an impartial mediator and led the committee through important discussions on the Prime Minister's involvement in the WE charity scandal. Before entering public life, Rachel earned a strong reputation for building community and empowering others. Working as a youth sociologist and leadership consultant, her work across Canada and let me start that sentence again. Working as a youth sociologist and leadership consultant, her work took her across Canada and gave her the opportunity to work with businesses, non-for-profit, universities, colleges, and young world changers. Rachel graduated with great distinction from the University of Lethbridge. She holds a Bachelor of Education, a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, Political Science, and Psychology. And in 2016, Rachel was named one of Lethbridge's top 40 under 40. Ladies and gentlemen, wow. Rachel!
Okay, but this podium though, like it's huge. I'm a very tall individual, and I'm actually feeling a little intimidated by it right now. Well, it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. But more so, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for being advocate for this incredibly magical space called the internet. It's quite incredible. I was walking my staff through a bit of a timeline the other day in terms of technology and how it's evolved. And it was this revealing moment for me because I was talking about having a black and white television in my household as a child, and you're like, what? And then I talked about having like a television that sat on the floor, and you were like, what? and so anyway, on and on we go. And it was this moment where I realized, oh my goodness, like I crossed over. I am now officially at that place where I am bringing up that next generation, and I am talking about my childhood, and it is totally out of their realm of understanding. So, a very interesting moment indeed. But I am still decently young and have a long life ahead of me, and so I look forward to watching the way technology continues to evolve. I look forward to watching the way that we continue to innovate, create, overcome challenges that our world faces. And I can only begin to imagine what that might look like. A part of this session was actually a bit of a dreaming session with my staff, because I find it helpful. And so I just said, let's just like throw ideas out there. Like anything. Just think about where the internet could go. Think about the possibilities. Think about the difference it could make in different sectors of society. And so with my fabulous interns at the table, we came up with all sorts of ideas. And they just really appreciated the exercise or the opportunity to think outside the box and be creative and consider the possibilities. I want our world to take that posture in so many things, but especially when it comes to technology. We have far too many people in this country who think creatively, who dare to innovate, only to start something and then to sell it off. And we have to stop doing that. As a country, we have to think innovatively, yes, think creatively, dare to challenge the parameters that are currently set for us. But then we have to be able to develop within our own country and make it something of worth here, a bragging right for our nation. And so that is something that I'm passionate about and will certainly continue to advocate for. But it is based on a premise. And the premise is this, that the internet is available and that it remains a free space, an equal playing field where we all get to engage, where gatekeepers are few and where government interaction, or I should say limitation, is minimal. Now I understand that there is some engagement needed, but I would make the argument that right now we are watching as the government is intruding to a far greater extent than it should. You've been here all day, so I'll keep my comments brief, but I can't help myself because I'm extremely passionate about three things. Bill C-11, Bill C-18, and the forthcoming online legislation. So indulge me for just one moment. Bill C-11 has been on the books for a while. You'll recall it started out as Bill C-10. It has to do with online censorship. I'm sure you've spoken about it in great detail. It concerns me because I view it as a form of censorship. I view it as a form of the government telling us what we can see or what we can say or what we can hear online. It is a form of government engagement in such a way that winners and losers will be picked. As much as they tried to convince us that user-generated content is out, we have confirmation from PM Scott himself and even the minister that it is in. We know that Mr. Scott has tried to walk this back several times after telling the truth by mistake, but it is in fact true, and you all know that. And so this is something that we have to continue to use our voices on, and I'm so proud, especially of our digital first creator community, and the fact that they've taken up their voice, I believe, in a very productive manner on this. But there still remains lots of work to be done, because as we know, it is in the Senate at the moment, and there are and will continue to be numerous amendments proposed. At that point then, once it's going through the Senate, it will come back to the House. We will only have an opportunity to discuss it very briefly before it will be forced through. And our concern is that it's going to be considered in such a way that all of the amendments are put at the same time, which means you don't have the opportunity to separate them out and discuss each one individually or both individually, but rather just as a package. And that's concerning to me because I believe it thwarts democracy. Because it doesn't allow for dialogue to ensue or for concerns to be raised that in fact need to be in order to carry out legislation. That said, if I can be political for just a moment, or partisan I should say, I do look forward to forming government and I do look forward to repealing the subdivision. I will move on to Bill C-18. Bill C-18 is currently a Heritage Committee on which I sit. This, of course, has to do with online news, or I should say it has to do with news being made available online. And so, of course, this is a way for the government to, essentially what they're doing is they're facilitating a bargaining process that is meant to take place between platforms such as Google and Facebook and the eligible news businesses, they're called. And so these two entities will have to engage in bargaining with one another, and ultimately these platforms will pay for news. The problem with this bill is that there are components of it that are extremely vague and left up to far too great interpretation by the CRTC, therefore giving them immense amounts of control over the internet and how that plays out. One of the greatest concerns, and of course Michael Geist has pointed this out, is the fact that it ascribes value to links. Well, all of you in this room know that without links there is no internet. And so as soon as you start going down this road of playing games with links have value in some settings but not in others, links have values if they're connected to some content but not if it's connected to other content, that's a problem. It's a huge problem in terms of the internet and the fact that it can become very quickly over-commercialized. It's a problem in terms of our ability as the general public to navigate the internet. We all know that the internet has become the new public square, so it's this incredible space where we get to exchange ideas and information freely. Yes, there's some content that's paid for, absolutely, and that's no problem. Welcome to new commerce, incredible. But that doesn't mean that every link should be ascribed a value. And so that's extremely problematic and something that we're fighting in this legislation. There are numerous other concerns with this bill as well. Ultimately, though, I'll sum it up with this. Someone called it a patchwork bailout. So in other words, news companies have, I should say, paper media, has been losing out on advertising dollars for a number of years now. Meanwhile, places like Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc., have been, of course, increasing in the revenues that they're able to bring forward because of advertising. That is simply a result of our way of life shifting. We engage online. That's where we often go. And so it makes sense then for private entities to invest their advertising dollars there versus paper. So, as a result then, newspapers have been concerned about this, and for many of them, fair enough. Ethnic outlets, small local newspapers that report the community news, they're going out because they can't maintain themselves, because again, their business models largely rely on advertising. So along came the government, and they put it forward, Bill C-18 forward, as if it was for the little guy. But what concerns me is that that is not at all what this bill is about. Instead, this bill will actually send the vast majority of funds to the larger broadcasters. They are not the ones that are hard done by. And the PDO officer has reported that it will be the CBC, for example, which is already a publicly funded broadcaster, that will receive about 75% of the revenue from this bill. That's a problem. It's a huge problem. I could go on and on, but at the end of the day, the reality is that the government actually had a choice, and they could have put a program in place that actually would have assisted these local newspapers while simultaneously respecting the beauty of the internet. They chose not to, which I believe is petty politics and incredibly damaging to the internet in its present form, but also to our digital future. So, it is with great pleasure that I am also fighting Bill C-18. That brings me to my last point, and that is the forthcoming online commerce legislation. Now, you may or may not have paid attention that about a year ago, the government put forward Bill C-36, which was the first iteration of online harm, or a bill having to do with online harm. Then they had to walk it back, because, for multiple reasons. But the primary one being that they touted this bill as being one that would protect minority groups online. Minority groups would be protected from harm, discrimination. They would be given an opportunity to thrive without undue discrimination. However, it was pointed out that this legislation actually could in fact backfire and make their lives worse. Let me give you a very practical example. Under this first iteration of legislation, the discussion was around a 24-hour takedown. In other words, if Facebook, let's say for example, gets a complaint that there are comments that are being made that are harmful in nature, then they must be taken down within 24 hours. Now, Facebook doesn't have the ability or the desire to hire individuals to check these complaints and make sure that they're verified. Instead, an algorithm or robot will be put in place to just simply consider the concern and make sure the post comes down. The reason being because it would take them thousands upon thousands of employees to monitor this in person. And so an algorithm can be set and do the job. If they didn't, then they would be found to be non-compliant. If they're found to be non-compliant, then of course you can back. So, all that to say, 24-hour takedown, use of algorithm. Here's the problem. Let's say you're a minority Jewish group, and let's say that there's an anti-Semite group. Let's say that this group gets together and they go online and they go crazy in their organizational efforts to complain about every comment made by a Jewish individual. Very quickly, you just silenced those voices. You wiped out that Jewish community. Because if you complain and complain and complain and complain and keep the complaints going in a very organized fashion, which groups are capable of, and if Facebook is forced to do a 24-hour takedown and doesn't actually have eyeballs reviewing them, you have effectively silenced minorities. You've taken them offline. So in essence, you can begin this war where something that was well intended to protect the minority groups actually ends up being used as a weapon against them. Bill C-36 was walked back, and we are told that the government is now in the process of coming forward with new legislation having to do with online. I cannot be assured of the content of this bill, so I will refrain from commenting further, other than to say the concern I will look for is making sure that it does, in fact, provide protection for all people. My concern is that when we begin going down these routes of wanting to put in new terms like harm versus hate, then that needs to be clearly defined. And all too often it's left subjective, which again allows for such terms to be weaponized and often hurt the vulnerable. So that is something that I will be continuously keeping my eye on. Further to that, another problem that could potentially be brought forward with an online harm bill is actually that you're putting censorship in the hands of big tech companies, which I also don't believe we want. So if you're leaving it up to these tech companies to determine whether or not something should be kept online or taken down offline, then you are essentially asking them to play the role of policing the internet. And they will then be censoring what Canadians can or cannot say or post online. And so we have to consider the ramifications of such a decision. Ultimately, for me, whether it is Bill C-18 or Bill C-11 or the online harm bill that we're expecting in the next few months, the ultimate goal for me is to protect this space that I believe has served and will continue to serve us for many, many, many years to come. And I think we have to be very careful in how we proceed to ensure that the internet is maintained as this magical space where the exchange of information and ideas is readily able to occur, where innovation is encouraged, where creative minds are celebrated, ultimately where commerce can thrive, where lasting engagement can take place, and where all people can access a way to a better future. Because I believe it's that powerful. And so together I think that's what we're all contending for. And so it's just a pleasure to have the opportunity to come and join you for this time.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You're amazing. We love watching you at committee. And I encourage everyone to, we have tons of wine and food. Please don't make me take this home.